be a very fast video. It's really just an update to my last video of putting the motor back together. There's two things I want to cover really quickly. So first thing is I got some comments that I should never put grease on the teeth of the gears. Never even occurred to me that that was a bad thing to do, but it makes complete sense. Obviously that would attract dust and it would gum up the motor a lot faster. So I've gone ahead and cleaned up all of these gears and the teeth and made sure that everything is grease free at this stage. So I went back and did that. I removed this cover, did the same thing. So that's been all addressed, and I thank all of you that gave me that feedback. I appreciate it. The other thing I want to talk about is the back of this motor. Now, if you remember, when I was going through this, I called this a thermostatic switch. That's not what it is at all. Thermostatic switch, as you recall, is a switch that will cut off the motor if it gets too hot. Well, that's built inside the motor. That's not what this is. What this was a set of contacts that when you put power to the motor, it would actually engage the contacts, and these two connections would go to the radio and mute it. So consider that you're on a station and you push one of the push buttons and the dial has to spin with the motor. You would hear all the noise in between stations. So what they did was they disengaged the audio section with the switch while it was searching for the place where it needed to go. Now, in my radio, this was never connected. I know in the older Detrola models of this radio, it was. And the reason why I know that is because my good electronics mentor and friend, Brendan, worked on one of the Detrola models. His was connected, mine isn't. So you have to ask the question, why did mine never have wire? Well, the pretty simple solution that Brendan was able to figure out, and I'm going to share it with you. And I'm going to move over to the schematic for a second. I'm going to turn this off and pick up the camera and show you. So we'll be right back. Okay, I'm going to try to do this without moving the camera around too much, so I apologize if it moves. But what you'll see here is capacitor C19. When you hit the button, it actually sends the audio signal to ground. That's what it does. So when you push the motor, the button, and the motor engages, it takes that signal, cuts it off, puts it into ground. That's why you don't need that other switch that I showed you right here. So that was a model change when they put this together. This must be a later version. So that's exactly how they did it with that capacitor, C19. Okay? So let me put this on tripod and we'll get back to business. Okay, now that we got that out of the way, just want to cover one other thing which I touched upon a moment ago. So I didn't mention the history of the radio yet, and in episode 5, this is going to be episode 4A. In episode 5, I'm going to go into this in much more detail. But basically, this radio, although it's a Silvertone, was made by Detrola, which was a radio manufacturer in Detroit. And Detrola made almost all of the Silvertone radios, but they made other ones too. So they were a fairly large operation that made radios for lots of companies, mostly department stores. And this is one that they made for Sears Roebuck. There's a little bit more history, but why is this called an Egyptian radio? Well, you have to look at the answer back to the 1920s when the tomb of King Tut was discovered. Which basically kicked off the Art Deco movement in the U.S. So all of the ornate things that they found when they found the tomb, eagles and all of the Egyptian type symbols, really kicked off the Art Deco movement. And this radio was built right before 1939, and I personally believe that this was to coincide with the 1939 World's Fair. I haven't seen anything that corroborates what I'm saying, but the 1939 World's Fair was very big on Art Deco and had a lot of stuff around the Egyptian theme with the discovery of King Tut's tomb. So I'm thinking that that Sears Roebuck and Detrola saw an opportunity and said, okay, we've got the World's Fair coming up. Let's do something that's Egyptian. We'll call it Egyptian, or it looks Egyptian. And that's how this radio came to be. So that's why it's a fairly rare radio, because I think it was just a very limited production run in preparation for that event. I don't know how many were made. I still need to do some research, but that's why I think this is called an Egyptian radio. Aside from the obvious, bezel that really does look very Egyptian, but that's the history that I've been able to find so far. Next episode, we'll go into a little more detail about the Trolla and some other pieces of history on this set. So, all right, that's it for this one. Hope you guys have a great weekend, and I'm going to continue building or putting this whole tuning mechanism back together. I'm still shining parts here. Here's our wheel. So I'm still busy doing what I need to do. Have a good one, everybody. Thank you.